Questions like, why are we here? What happens when you die? Where did we come from? And is there a God?
The U.S. government has been shown to have had a long-term interest in Scientology.
This is a practical question here.
I know this is an illusion, or dream, or call it the way you want to call, you know?
We are a bigger threat to the people who are secretly trying to control this planet than any other group on this planet.
But the problem with an atheist is he believes that his belief is based on fact.
Oh, it's wireless. Yeah, you got wireless one.
He's impressive. He's a powerful guy.
I can't make this shit up.
The leaders of this are not just after our church, they're after the whole of this planet.
He was put here to work out his own salvation. And we feel in Scientology that we've made a very big stride in that direction.
Howdy everybody, and welcome to the Indie Scientology podcast. I'm your host, Andy Nolch, the Space Cowboy. And isn't it lovely to be here, listening to the good old Strauss? This is a podcast that has everything to do with the interesting world of Scientology. Yes, that odd religion you might have heard about. If you don't know what Scientology is, then I'll tell you. It's a bunch of self-help books and exercises that evolved into a religion created by American sci-fi author L. Ron Hubbard in the 1950s. Today's guest interview is with Trey Lotz. It's part 2 now. I hope you liked part 1 last 2 weeks ago. Coming up is a long success story on OT8 by one of Trey Lotz's PCs, so I think you're going to like that. Oh, it's now time to go down that rabbit hole into the interesting Scientology world where up is down and down is up, where left is right and right is left, where what you thought was impossible actually is possible. Welcome to the show on this second day of April 2019.
Hello, welcome.
We just missed out on April Fool's Day. Anyway, there is something on my mind, and it is the movie called The Box from 2009. It's quite an interesting movie. I think some OTs would be able to see the truths in that movie, and I think some people who are into the UFO stuff and really have an idea of what's going on would also see some truths into that movie. It's by the same guy who made Donnie Darko, and I was aware that a guy called Richard Kelly, and I was aware that he had family in NASA, and so then after watching Donnie Darko, I was like, oh, it's a little bit interesting. He's got family at NASA, and it talks a little bit about time travel and like a parallel universe. And I thought, oh, it's a little bit interesting. And I thought, I've got to check out some other movies by this guy. And I checked out a movie called Southland Tales, which was the next movie he made, and it had. My suspicions were right that this guy knew a fair bit, and it had references to soldiers doing like telepathy and holes in space-time being opened up, and just all the hardcore truths and conspiracy and that sort of stuff. It was in this movie, and the movie was terrible. I think I guess it was a work of art, but it was like an ugly work of art, if you know what I mean. Like, it was just... if you ever see Southland Tales, I probably wouldn't recommend seeing it because it's just a dog's breakfast, and it's just like... it's like the complete opposite of Donnie Darko. Like it's like a nightmare. It's just so shit. It's just genuinely. It's not as bad as probably your average Hollywood movie, because they're just nothing. They're just literally a waste of time. Like, this has some interesting stuff in it, and if you know about what's going on, you could see how the person who wrote it is aware. Like, it talks about, I think, like, you know, the government monitoring everyone, and it had... Sorry, I'm going off topic. I'm not going to go into that movie, but you can check it out. It had agent provocateurs in it and stuff, which was interesting. But anyway, so then I watched another one by the same guy, and it was The Box, and this was like the complete opposite to Southland Tales. It was like back to like a normal sort of peaceful movie, like Donnie Darko. Like, it wasn't as amazing as Donnie Darko, but it actually was a good piece of art and it was worth watching. But there's references to underground bases, there's references to Mars, there's references to aliens, there's references to the Men in Black in it. There's some philosophy in it. There's references to bodies being transported in water, which I find is interesting, because I know LRH talks a bit about Dayton's being put in ice or something. There's references to implanting, like where you see the light and that sort of stuff. There's references to humans being containers and just a box, a temporary state of being, like we're trapped in this box. And the aliens monitor the box, and they upgrade it, and they monitor these containers that we're in. And there's references to this, and it's a sort of movie where if you watched it, you would think it would just be like some sort of horror movie. That was sort of okay. That's what you would think if you didn't know that it actually was exposing some serious truths, and that's what tends to happen with some of these movies. Like, people just drop out the truth, but it's only for people who are knowledgeable in esoteric information and who know what the word esoteric means. They're the only people who are going to pick up on what's going on in that movie. And so if OTs want to check it out, they should check out The Box, because it's just interesting. Anyway, went off topic. So here is an independent Scientology success story, and it's from Trey Lotz PC, and it's for OT8, and it's long. All right. First, I'd like you to know that I have been on this journey for 27 years trying to achieve the end phenomena of OT8. In August 1989, I completed new OT8 on the free winds. I felt good and certainly knew I was on the way to freedom, a real OT. I was very active and certainly accomplished a lot during this time, both on training, my careers, and 3D activities. However, I never thought I had the abilities I should have. In 2010, a friend confided with me and told me that OT8 was split up and David Miscavige will be making the first part into OT9. I didn't understand it, and I blew him off. I wrote it up and thought he was crazy. However, I never forgot what he told me. In January 2016, I decided to leave the corporate Church of Scientology due to alterations of standard tech, underhanded activities, and excessive fundraising. I decided to go online, and I learned a lot, including OT8. My life started to change, and then I met Trey Lotz, auditor extraordinaire. Trey has perfect ARC, KRC, and a kindness to help me achieve what I want in life. You know how attorneys are sometimes called ambulance chasers? Well, Trey is a meter read chaser. With high ARC, he is able to make sure all charge he sees is handled to an EP. So when I went into my first session as part of Flying Routes, he was able to get the exact area I wanted to handle. Why? Because he asked me the exact question, and the first one, which gave the greatest relief and ended with a floating TA. I believe the session was under 3 minutes. That and the subsequent auditing led me to believe that he is the auditor to do the job and help me achieve the EP of OT8. He isn't interested in making money per se. He isn't being rushed into completing something by a deadline, and he is not willing to compromise applying standard tech to each situation. This sold me. I received certainty processing from 8008. I didn't even think someone would be delivering those processes. I went along with it, and it really turned out to be great. It created more stability in my life. We could all use more, right? It ended non-survival games I had by unbalancing the flows which held the game together. I saw that over and over in his auditing. In the end, my flows are more smooth and have opened up. I was ready for OT8, but I had another action to do first. It was a fantastic confidential action, and that cleared up a lot for me. Step 1. The first question was meant exactly for me. It took 10 seconds to grok the question. All right, let's just look up the word grok. I mean, whoa. Grok. Okay, so like understand intuitively. It took 10 seconds to grok the question, then another 5 seconds to duplicate it, then another 15 seconds to look, then the laughter started and went on for 2.5 minutes, a total of 3-minute session, another floating TA, and now I knew my life was changed. I knew this was what I was looking for. Then the next session. This one hit me hard. The amount of power I recovered left the body with somatics I hadn't felt in a session before. So I thought I can do this and went in for another session. Well, this session took my breath away and also took my body strength away. I couldn't lift my head, trying to look at Trey and telling him I couldn't lift my head and didn't know what was happening. I was trying to look at Trey to make sure he was still there and didn't blow on me. No, he was being right there with me and helped me through. This was another instance of power surging back into me as a Thetan. At the time, I really didn't know exactly what it was, but then I realized that I was regaining power and I just didn't know how to use it yet. After a while, many sessions, I figured it out and was able to control the power better. This was just step 1 of OT8. It unstuck me from areas of the time track. Step 2 was an appendage of 1, but handling something different, but related. By this time, a lot of charge had already blown, and now I'm digging for more charge and found charge that I never knew existed. Almost seemed unreal. I was able to detach myself from this charge and free myself from the time track again. I actually saw it stretch out, and by this I mean that the areas where I had stuck attention were gone. It was like there was no one on the 5 freeway at all. Therefore, the track had nothing on it, and therefore was stretched out. I would sit in session really working hard at finding something, and at times had to give up because I didn't find anything. I was very happy about that though. Step 3 was what I had on the free wins. By this time, I knew I had to really dig here again. I was still able to find more to look at despite doing it before. Could you imagine those bastards at RTC diluted the levels so much that I could not recover myself due to charge that was prior to this step? Finding out the truth about myself was truth revealed. The amnesia really buried this charge, and I never would have recovered it had I not left the corporate church of Scientology. So I'm just laughing because the truth is just so deep. I mean, I was talking to a friend before, and the conversation was kind of boring, and then it just got into the cool stuff, the underground bases, the aliens, the truth, the exciting, funny stuff, and then it just got funnier, and I hit that point with my friend where he couldn't believe what I was saying, like as in where he's just like, where you hit that barrier where the implants kick in, where the person cannot confront reality because they've been programmed, and so like they just can't have it. And it's really funny, like teasing them like that, like getting them to the point where you can see the implant kick in and the programming kick in, and they're just like, I think you're being silly or something, or like they just can't have it. And then I just find that so funny because it's just cute because it's just like, look at that, like it's just funny. They just need to get audited and do spiritual stuff and confront the truth, but they can't. But it's really funny because you can have a conversation that's so logical, and I can show so much logic, and the person's like, yeah, Andy, he's smart, he's logical, he gets to the truth, and then it goes on, and then I hit them with the truth, and like they're just like their computer can't compute. Like they're just like, it doesn't make sense. Why is he so logical and smart in this area and can work out things? And then next minute he's talking about underground bases and like the government controlling the weather and like Mars bases and like soldiers moving objects with their minds or whatever. It fries them. And so because they've got implants, they can't have an open mind, and they can't just go, really? That's what's actually going on? And I'll be like, yeah, that actually is what's going on. Like that's what the evidence is. I spent years studying this. And like they just go, like my friend said, he goes, you just must be so bored with life, like the mundane life, that you go into these areas of fantasy to make your life. It's a real psych answer, actually. Real evil. He's not good. I shouldn't communicate with him that often but he's a real intelligent guy, but you have to really be careful who you communicate with, and you have to limit it if someone's low-toned. Because I believe in cursing, and it's not even I believe. I mean, there's evidence for it. Like I'm telling you, there's like it's like sort of curses happen. Bad energy hangs around certain things and stuff, and if you communicate with a certain person, you can pull in bad luck into your universe and stuff. And anyway, but what did he say? He said that life is so boring for you, which is true. The mundane life, the box that the SPs have put us in, and the boring mainstream life is. I do actually find that incredibly boring, and I absolutely hated it. And then when I found out the truth, I was like, oh, no, things are actually really cool and exciting, and this game is absolutely wild, and this game is off its tits, what's going on, the actual truth. Right? But the little box they put you in is just like a boring prison cell. Like, people don't realize they're in a prison cell, but they're not actually locked in their homes or in a prison cell, but they're living in an existence that's like a mental prison. Anyway, so it's basically saying that the mental prison that you're in is so boring that you go off into these areas of fantasy because it entertains you and stuff. And he was saying that that's the most logical explanation of it. And it's funny because I was just laughing because I was just like, he just can't confront the truth. Like, it blows his mind. The truth is just so out there. And that's why Scientologists are always going to come across as bizarre. It's always going to be controversial. It's always going to be odd. It's always going to be sort of weird. Because the truth is just so different to what's actually going on. The truth is so different to what they make you think is going on. And until the huge gap of what they make us think is going on comes closer to what is really going on, Scientology and Scientologists will always be considered odd and just wacky. Because we'll always say bizarre stuff. And I remember someone was talking about, I think I heard something, I don't know, where someone who works for like the Men in Black or who's a part of the system here on Earth to cover up the truth, he said something like, the truth is so ridiculous. I think he was talking to Stephen Greer. The guy said, the truth is just so ridiculous, no one's going to believe you. And Stephen Greer was just like, yeah, I know. I mean, as in, the truth has gone, like, what's actually happened has gone so far and so wild that if anyone reports on it, no one's going to believe you. Do you know what it's kind of like? It's kind of like, imagine you're on like a summer camp or something, and a few of you go off on an adventure to the other side of the summer camp, and then even further, and then you come back, and wacky stuff went on in that adventure, and you come back and you tell people, and maybe one person's like, I don't believe your story or whatever. Well, then you go on, the next day you go, well, I'm going to go on this adventure to the same place again, but we'll go even further. And you go even further and it gets even wackier. Like what goes on there is just really, really wild. And you come back with your group back to the main summer camp and you tell them the updates and what happened to you this day now. You tell them that. And it's just so wild that they're just like, I don't believe you. They're just like, no, that's completely ridiculous. That's so ridiculous. Like, I don't believe you. You're lying. That's basically what's going on. Like what NASA are doing, what the top scientists are doing, like taking ayahuasca and then having meetings with aliens and shit. Having psychic wars. Spraying shit in the sky that we breathe in that quite possibly means that they can control our behavior or something. Like creating parallel universes and shit. Like just stuff that's so out there that it's just got to that point where they're basically they're broken with the mainstream for so long, right? Because they started doing this stuff in the 50s and stuff. Well, earlier than that, but they really sort of started building a lot of underground bases in the 50s, and they started separating the breakaway civilization that they are. It's gone on for so long now that they've gone on such a wacky adventure that and the mainstream has just stayed the same and barely any secrets have gotten out. That when you say to someone, look, this is what they did on their adventure on their summer camp, people are just like, whoa, no, you're lying. They just can't believe it. But it's true. It's actually exciting. It's really cool because it's like, whoa, you know. Like, I mean, no one, if they're new to this sort of stuff, is going to believe the Montauk stories, for example. But then you look into it further, and David Wilcock said this as well about the Montauk stories. I think he said he first read it and he didn't think any of it would be true, and he just read it because I guess it was interesting, and he'd heard about it. And then, you know, years later, after all this data and all this sort of stuff, he's like, no, there's truth to this. And I'm the same in that now I can actually read the Montauk story and go, yeah, I mean, there's stuff there's stuff to this, but if I was new to all this sort of subject, it's so advanced. It's such a high gradient. It's like taking someone off the street and giving them OT8. They're just going to be like, what the hell? It's just too much for them to believe. Anyway, the Montauk stuff, you know, now that I've looked at all the information and stuff, it's just like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of truth to this. You know, this isn't rubbish. I mean, there's seriously truth to this. But anyway, it's just wild. I mean, look at it. I mean, if you sit down and actually tell them what's going on with vaccines, that's hard enough for someone to believe. Or 9/11, that's hard enough for someone to believe, let alone the real truth, the really, really deep truth. It's much deeper. I mean, that's just like not only is it hard to communicate you can't even communicate the idea to them because you need like 6 hours to talk to them because you need to give them all this back info to explain it. At least you can actually sort of explain vaccines and 9/11. You can sort of explain them without having to go on too much talk. But, you know, it's just amazing. The breakaway civilization. It's so cool in certain respects. I'm so proud of that generation. It was really LRH's generation, people who were born around about his time that just progressed things massively. And I mean, we got some help from aliens, but it's just epic. And that's why this podcast is actually really quite funny, because I just lay out the truth for you, and it's probably a disservice because, you know, I guess if I was first into this sort of stuff and I heard this, I guess I'd be put off because it just sounds too out there. But look, I'm sorry, I'm just going to tell you the truth, and hopefully you can just find it entertaining and you won't believe it and you won't understand it. But as you go on and you evolve more and more and you find out more and you do your OT levels and you study all the other wealth of information, because you need to study the other wealth of information in order to get the datums of comparable magnitude. That's a whole new barrier to study. You find out about this in the Data Evaluators course because you've got Student Hat and that teaches you how to study, but there's a whole nother level to study as well, which is a Data Evaluators course, and that's just, to me, that's just like Student Hat 2. You know what I mean? Student Hat on steroids, you know? And it's really analysing information and actually reading it and understanding what's really going on in the information, you know? And it's a Data Evaluators course, and it's really good. There's a quote for that at the end of this podcast. But you can't understand what a big key point of the Data Evaluators course is that you can't understand what you're studying unless you have datums of comparable magnitude. See what I mean? Let's say you're studying a conspiracy theory about NASA. Unless, like, you've worked for NASA or you've watched all these documentaries on NASA, you're going to really struggle to understand what the hell this guy is talking about some conspiracy theory about NASA. You need to have all this back data. You know what I mean? That's the same with when it comes to studying Hubbard stuff. It's very deep. It's very esoteric. It requires so much back data to understand, and people just don't have it. They don't have the datums of comparable magnitude, so they never really understand Hubbard. But I have always been this funky person that keeps my mind open to things, and because of my day job, I study all this other stuff. I study other practices. I study info about the aliens. I study stuff about NASA. I study stuff about Mars. Like all this other stuff. I study stuff about communism and feminism and Russia and just like all this stuff. So then when I read Hubbard, I've got all these datums of comparable magnitude that I can actually like get what the hell Hubbard's talking about. You know, he might talk about a court case, and I have datums of comparable magnitude. I'm like, yeah, I know, I can understand, I get what he's talking about, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Someone who doesn't have any datums of comparable magnitude doesn't understand. I'll give you one example, because he mentions this in the Data Evaluators course. Hubbard says how the newspapers, he says newspapers, and this was written in like 1970, he says newspapers today are mostly full of propaganda. unless you've got datums of comparable magnitude, you won't understand that. Do you know what I mean? You're like, oh yeah, I get it, propaganda, blah, blah, blah. But it's just like, no, you don't understand it. Actually go pick up a newspaper and flick through each page, and the amount of propaganda is epic. And the thing is that you need to know a lot about the world in able to be able to pick what is propaganda. But let's say you pick up an article and it'll talk about the weather and it'll be some bullshit about global warming. Then the next one will be like something about how women are playing football, and that's part of a whole feminist agenda and a whole global depopulation program. And so if you take Joe Blow off the street and you get him to read that little line by Hubbard which says how the newspapers are full of propaganda, that guy, he'll just be like, oh, okay, like it doesn't really mean something to him. But someone like me who has all this data on that can actually go, yeah, I know. It's full on from start to finish. It's pretty much just chock full of it. And the whole newspaper is designed to change the way you think and to program you and to key you in. Like, it is totally evil. That's really what it is. And Hubbard's right. It's mostly full of propaganda. You know? So I can read all this stuff by Hubbard because I've got all this life experience to understand it. And I think I noticed this when I first got into Scientology. I think I noticed that I don't get what the hell Hubbard's talking about. Like, I didn't know it was datums of comparable magnitude, but I just was like, I guess maybe I thought I didn't know enough to understand what he's talking about. I would say it doesn't seem real to me. Like, I don't get what he's... But now I can read Hubbard and I can hear data about top OT levels and all this sort of stuff, and they're real to me because I've got so much mass and data to back it up. Anyway, just saying that because I'm on a data evaluators course and it's deep, you know. There's just like a missing step in the whole study thing. That's just like, I've always thought, I'll watch people and I'll go and they'll study a course, they'll read all this stuff by Hubbard and they'll be like, yeah, I did this, blah, blah, blah. And then they wouldn't be like a genius. They wouldn't be an expert. They wouldn't be really wise and spotting things and stuff in the universe and what's really going on. And it's because they just didn't really understand it, okay? They didn't have an MU, but they didn't really understand it. They didn't have datums of comparable magnitude. Do you know what I mean? So there's a difference between... There's really knowing and there isn't knowing, you know. Like, you can read about ayahuasca and say it's a hallucinogenic drug. But have you tried it? Have you spoken to people? Have you spent an hour researching it? Do you really know what ayahuasca is? Or do you have like a really shit definition of ayahuasca, like it's a hallucinogenic drug? Do you see what I mean? Like, when you've got datums of comparable magnitude, you know, you really understand what ayahuasca is. And so then when the person reads out that sentence and they mention ayahuasca during a sentence or during an interview or something, they mention that just during the interview, you really get what they're talking about and you can follow along with it. And it's like, it's almost a shame because the data evaluators course, it really gets you really smart. It's like you already have to be super smart to freaking well study it in the first place because it's so deep. You know? Anyway. Sorry, totally went off topic. All right, I'll continue. So here are some real life successes and changes in my life. I've a rental business for 16 years that I always seem to rent to those who I thought were low-toned. Since I've been on this level, I ended tenancy with 3 of them, all gone, all long-term tenants who cause trouble. I no longer have to back off. Or the willingness for this type of person to be in any way in my life. One tenant who I was evicting even wrote me a text and told me she loved me. Go figure. I know I've made a different... Some spelling mistakes. Outrageous OT behaviour. Come on. I know I've made a difference in these 3 tenants' lives, and they are better for it. Now I replace, maybe the OT is struggling to remain in this universe. All right. Now, it's just funny. You get those low-tone lefties who attack me and stuff, and they have a go at some of the spelling stuff, and it's just like, wow, like you're really fixed. You're really living in a box, you know. You must spell certain things right, you know. Anyway, now I replaced one of those tenants with a great one with no issues. My income is starting to go up as a result of this. I've put order in the buildings, which is bringing in more income. I am not a slum lord, but I didn't remodel the place a lot. Now I've remodeled one and have the second one in progress. I've never had so many floating TAs in my 35 years in Scientology. To me, that's a win. My flows are opening up. I received an all-expense-paid 5-week trip in Europe. I have a fun goal in life to see as many countries on this globe. I've seen 46 so far, and I have a game with a friend for the past 35 years to see who can have the most. Now I'll be ahead of him for the first time in 35 years. I get to see 6 to 7 more countries on this trip. My world is brighter. I drive around now and find myself exterior to my body and car and see how clear and nice life is. I had an encounter at the bank and there were a lot of people waiting in front of me and I was told to sit and wait. About 3 minutes later, the banker came and told me I was next. I was able to change the time so that I was next. Let's read that again. I had an encounter at the bank and there were a lot of people waiting in front of me and I was told to sit and wait. About 3 minutes later, the banker came and told me I was next. I was able to change time so that I was next. Nice. I also had, see, that's the thing that where people hit a barrier where they can't believe is when you let them know about how you can really influence the universe around them, they just can't have it. They're just like, what? Like, they've been going along so long, so brainwashed, that they can't have any effect on this physical universe around them. They just can't comprehend that you can just do that. And in my theory, where it's like a computer game, it just makes sense. It's just like a computer game. You can just do that. You can just make things happen in a computer game, you know. It's just not like, it's not that magical, you know. Anything can happen in the computer game, you know. But that's where people hit a barrier. Like, they're just like, what? They just can't confront the truth. And you learn a little bit about this on the Data Evaluators course, where people just get hit with some data and they just like, you know, they become reasonable or they not is it or something, but they just can't. It just hit, you know, you have to be quite open-minded and stuff to do a proper evaluation because you have to be able to confront the truth, and the truth is freaking wild. It is absolutely off its tits. But people just keep on saying that reality is just lame and boring. They keep on toning it down and going, no, it's not really going on. Oh, yes, the government might be spying on us and stuff and selling it to advertisers, and there's CCTV cameras everywhere and you can get tracked on your iPhone. Yeah, I can believe that, but just no anything further. No, I can't go further than that. And it's just like, yeah. I also had an idea of when I would finish OT 8, and it happened. During this time, I joined a new club so I could make some friends because I lost most of my Scientology friends. This is flourishing and prospering despite. I'm no longer the person I was 2 months ago, and I find it amazing that in such a short period of time my life has turned around so much. Oh, I almost forgot about the bees. A bunch of bees got into the building I was auditing in. Now that I had become more powerful, I locked myself in the building with them swarming around me and was able to handle all the bees by guiding them back out without getting stung once. And there was only one bee casualty. I saved a human life that day as well. I became cause over bees. So, I mean, I feel like that now, like as in, not so, as radical as that, but someone low tone will be like, oh, you're going to get cancer. Oh, this is going to, you might get into an accident. Oh, and it's just like, no. It's that attitude that will get me into an accident. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's cool. Like, it's all right. I'm not going to get cancer. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, it's okay. Like, just, people don't realize that they're just creating their own illnesses by thinking that they're possible and stuff, and not having this attitude that, yeah, you can just control a swarm of bees and you can just drive and never get into accidents, you know? It's your whole attitude. I mean, look, I haven't been using car insurance for a while, and I work a lot on the road, you know, and I've actually been going through a pretty wild 1.5 year period in my life, and I've had a ton of accidents. But in that whole time, like I dropped, like I mean, maybe I'll make a video about me being PTS, but I made a video maybe a year ago where I said, I've gone PTS, but I have been going through a PTS period recently, and I'm working my way through it and that sort of stuff. And for people who are like, why the hell would Andy, who's been a Scientologist for years, why would he go PTS and attack me and all that sort of stuff? But there's different levels of PTSness. You know what I mean? Like, when you're new to Scientology, someone can go PTS to small fries, basically. But when you become a bigger being and you expand more, you start going PTS to bigger things, because you're really starting to step out of the box. And if I stayed in my box, there's no way I would be PTS, because I know the PTS tech and all that sort of stuff. But when you try and expand out of that and do grand, bigger things, then you just go PTS to bigger things. I remember someone once said something about LRH going PTS once because he crashed a motorcycle in like 74 or something, or maybe 72, but he crashed a motorcycle, and the Sea Org members passed it off as L. Ron Hubbard, because like someone was like, well, why do you think L. Ron Hubbard's so amazing? Some attacker was like, why do you think L. Ron Hubbard's so amazing? You know what I mean? I mean, he crashed his motorcycle, so he went PTS, so he can't be that amazing and stuff. And they're like, yeah, but he's gone PTS to bigger things. Do you know what I mean? So for me, it's like I've gone PTS to bigger things. So it's like, so that's basically why, I mean, you know, I could stay in my box and I could not go PTS. You know what I mean? So I'm just trying to handle that origination. Someone might be thinking, why the hell would Andy, if he knows all this stuff about the tech and all that sort of stuff, why the hell would he still go PTS? And it's just like, there's more to the story. There's a lot more going on. It's not that simple. But if I was like, anyway, I think I might have handled that calm. Hopefully you can understand that. But what was I going to say? Totally went off topic. Oh, anyway, so I've been PTS basically for almost like the past 2 years, really. And I haven't had car insurance. Ooh. And because it's just your belief that causes your own reality and stuff. I mean, you create your reality, you know. And I remember I was recently living with a girl who was low-toned, right? And she, needed to get her appendix out or some shit. And she fell down the steps once and stuff. Like, just these little bullshit PTS, like, accidents. But I feel like she's postulating them. Like, because I remember she was like, she was talking about something. She was like, oh, I shouldn't get sick, or oh, you shouldn't get that, and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, dude, you don't understand that your attitude can create reality. You got to have that confidence and stuff, you know. You're making these accidents happen. Of course, I never need my appendix removed or some shit. Of course, because it's our thoughts that affect things and create things. You know, anyway, during this 2-year period, no car accidents or anything besides one. And of course, the car accident was just like this little bump on the bumper. Still got to get it fixed on my car. It's probably going to cost me $2,000. It's like a little ding, or maybe $1,500. I could do it for cheaper if I do it myself or something. But you know, that's my attitude to cause that. Now, during this period that I'd gone PTS, I'd hit my thumb with a hammer, which was a proper accident because I think my nail actually peeled off, so it was a proper little accident. You know, I dropped 3 teapots just on the ground accidentally. Right, I had randomly sometimes would drop things like a spoon or like just those odd little mistakes you make, like you knock a phone off a table or just like little odd things I was having happen. I basically was actually having accidents. Now, funnily enough, I didn't have any colds or anything because that's not really my thing when I go PDS. My thing is like I'll get speeding tickets. I'll get speeding tickets suddenly come into my universe. I'll get in trouble with the council or something. They'll come around and be like, why'd you light a fire in the backyard because we're getting rid of leaves or whatever, and the council will come around and I'll get a fine for freaking all burning leaves in the backyard. I get when I go PDS, I get Big Brother on my back. You know what I mean? The government and stuff coming in. But no colds or anything, right? Because it's obviously not my thing. But you know, the little mistakes and stuff. And so, I mean, I went PDS, right? I've been PDS, right? But no car accident. Why didn't I smash into the Mercedes? You know what I mean? Expensive car. Why haven't I banged into an expensive car? Why haven't I gone? You know what I mean? Like, why? Why have they always been these little crappy little accidents? It's like God saying to me, "You're PDS, Andy," or like there's something wrong. You know, just these little crappy, shitty accidents. You know, they're selective. Do you see what I mean? But it's just like. It's just your attitude that creates things in your postulates. And I'm just like, and I know it's almost like God's looking after me. It's just like, so I'm just like, it's just funny because it's just like PDS that whole time, lots of driving, lots of also walking on roofs in actually very dangerous situations where I could easily have slipped off and hurt myself. Like, I mean, slipped off and died and shit, right? Heaps of situations where I could have slipped off a roof and died, right? On roofs where there's water and stuff, slippery roofs. Driving every day with Mercedes that I could just not look and accidentally turn and smash into a Mercedes. You know what I mean? Like you just lose concentration, have those little accidents. But the one little accident I have in my car was banging in to the back of an old van that was already going to get thrown out anyway, and the guy hasn't even asked me for the money for it yet because I think the old van's broken and I think he's just going to throw it out anyway. Like as in the engine's broken and stuff because it's old. So all I have to do is repair my car and it'll probably cost me $1,500. So that's a bit weird, isn't it? You know what I mean? Why that one thing and then all these other unimportant things like the teapot and the hitting in the thumb and just like little things. But anyway, it's just your belief. So other people around those bees would be like, oh my God, bees. And especially someone who's low tone like that girl I was just telling you about. She'll go, oh my God, bees, bees, oh, the bees are going to get me out. Like thinking it and freaking out and not realizing she's a fucking god that can manipulate this matrix going, oh, bees, 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 bees. And then they just bite her up and she freaking dies. I mean, that will happen to her. But what happens to this OT who's got belief, who's got knowledge, who's got certainty? He freaking guides the bees out of the building. And I don't know if I'll do something that bold. But I'll tell you what, if I was near those bees, I wouldn't be going, bees, bees, bees are going to attack me. Oh, I'm scared. I'm a little wuss. Sorry, I've got a bit of charge in this. I've got a lot of, I guess, bypass charge because I'm sick of people in this fucking matrix being pussies. I just see it so often. People going, oh, this is what I see. Like, this is what I perceive the energy from them. Oh, no, can't do that. Important, serious, scared. It's just like, whoa. Shut the fuck up. And wake up and stop being such a pussy. And that's one thing that really upsets me because what pussiness, scaredness, wimpiness, that leads to evil actions. That leads to you going along with what the government says and going along with evil things and vaccinating your kids and all this other shit. It leads on to all that stuff. The most important thing is to not be fearful and to take on the system and not Q&A. You know, like, oh, worried, oh, I think, oh, no. It's just like, dude, it's a freaking game. It's just like, why are you taking this shit so seriously, you know? Calm down. And anyway, it's just something I do not like. I've never liked it ever since I was a kid. Fear in people. I've always thought, harden up. Like, the level of fear amongst these earthlings here is just way too high. And that's why people are trapped here, because they're trapped by their fear. Seriously, the fear keeps them in the freaking mind control box that they live in. If they didn't have fear, they'll start becoming funky and odd. I'll tell you that. Anyway, well, all right. Time has opened up for me. I know I have a lot more time than I used to, even though I haven't changed the 24-hour clock. I know this because I'm doing more and actually want to as well. I gained another few years on this body, and that will be helpful for the future. I want to thank my 2D who gently urged me to look. I also want to thank LRH for persisting and making sure OT8 was complete for us all to have. Thank you, Trey, with ARC Brandy. Well, I mean, that is just, wow. That's the best success story I've ever read. And I like how it was on OT8 because it was an area where I was concerned if that even existed, OT8. So that was good because it handled OT8 for me. And but, I mean, that was a good success story. And, yeah, I mean, it sparked off that whole fear thing in me that, I mean, I perceive in this person, I don't think they've got much fear. I don't think they'll go, oh, no. I mean, that just really triggers me off because that's what I hate it in people, you know. You say, hey, go do something, and then they go, oh, I'm scared, worry, what are you going to do? And it's just like, whoa, just like, far out. People, and they're just wussiness. It's just like, oh, God, I have to dealing with a child, you know, I'm dealing with a little wuss, you know. And then it just leads to this evil behavior, you know. I mean, there isn't enough people with balls and confidence to just stand up and say, fuck it, I'm here, you got a problem with this? You know, I'm going to do this, you got a problem? Yeah, I've got confidence. You know, people need that. Not enough people with that. Anyway, it's now time for post of the week, and it's by Tristan Chopping on my YouTube channel. It's on my video, my KR about religion being bullshit. I made a KR, it's actually a pretty old one, me talking about religion being rubbish. About people who think religion's rubbish, and I think I sort of say that, no, there's truth to religion, but they get corrupted and stuff, but you shouldn't think they're bullshit. Because some, you know, lefties and low-tone people just pass off, oh, religion's bullshit, oh, it's not scientific, and it's just like, you just don't understand that advanced technology appears to be magic and bullshit religion stories. That you're looking at advanced tech there, you know. You know, show some cavemen a freaking UFO craft and they'll just be like, what the hell? Or just the average human, a UFO craft, and they're like, oh my God, what the hell, magic or whatever. And you just don't understand that they're like a magical field with lights coloring and colorful and moving weirdly in the sky is what happens when you open up and bend time-space, when you put certain chemicals together and you make the engine parts rub together a certain way. And the scientists are just like, yeah, that's just what happens. It's like, that's like how a truck moves along the road. You know, it makes a noise and it has headlights, you know, it's just like, but that amazing thing in the sky looks really wacky and shit and wild, and it's just like, you're just not used to it. If you're used to it, you just be like, yeah, that's a UFO and walk off. That's just advanced technology, you know. Anyway, this thing about It says, as far as I know, Jesus never wrote anything. I researched the Bible once, and from what I recall, the whole book falls apart on the fact that other people wrote sections from what they thought, and it's probable that, as was the practice at the time, people were writing as if they were another person. And then you get the political and financially motivated edits. I would be interested to know what Jesus actually wanted people to know and do. Shame he didn't do a podcast. It's just a good point. I mean, we just don't have any recordings of Jesus, you know. I'm sus about Jesus. I don't really know the truth about him. I mean, he seems like a good guy and stuff, but that's a whole other topic. We've been talking too much, so I'll get into this Scientology joke. Also, bring up the Jesus thing as I might offend people. But let me just say, there's evidence amongst some of these secret societies and stuff that I think Jesus wasn't a good guy. And he could be part of a control system. And the whole Lucifer idea is actually bringing light on the situation and giving people the ability to think for themselves and be their own gods. And it's actually not really a bad thing. Anyway, there's a lot going on. Why does Scientology make you hold a can in each hand so you can't keep your hand on your wallet? Well, I already read that a few days ago, so I'm not going to laugh out loud, but I'll tell you what, that's the best Scientology joke that I've ever read and probably will ever read on this podcast. I don't know where I found it, but someone must have written on the internet somewhere. It's now time for today's guest interview with Trey Lotz. This is part 2. I think we might discuss actually OT8 in this interview. It's good. I've talked enough. Let's dig into this. Chuck on a pot of tea and let's hear some talk about the world's most interesting and controversial religion, Scientology.
After all, we haven't been invited, and curiosity often leads to trouble. Goodbye, Dinah. Goodbye.
Did you meet LRH?
Yeah, in 75 when I was on the ship. He was on the ship. I was doing the internships there. And I talk about this in the Reza Aslan tape, you know, when it was probably one of the most amazing experiences of my life. Because, I mean, he was on the ship. I was on the ship. So you'd see him around and, you know, he'd talk to people here and there. But he was in his cabin and small ship, you know, you used to see him around. Then we went to Daytona Beach, and we were in a motel there on the beach. And, you know, they just set up shop there. And LRH was there. He'd come in and he would drive in his car. And I remember standing across the parking lot and looking at LRH and looking at him and thinking, hey, he got out of the car and walked. I said, man, just looks like a normal guy, you know. It's like you wouldn't really pick him out in the crowd, other than he was a little more flamboyant, probably, maybe was how he dressed. But anyway, so I was on the internship. I was, you know, a dutiful PC auditor, and I audited this guy, and I finished the session, and I walked out of the room with a folder under my arm, and I walked down this catwalk outside the motel room that I was auditing in, and around the corner comes LRH and two aides. And it's a very narrow catwalk. He's walking right towards me, and I go, uh-oh. And so anyway, it's too late to turn around. But anyway, so I walked towards him, and he looked me dead in the eye, and he said, hi. And I still can't describe the experience that I had at that instant. My experience of his, well, I know you could say, his bandwidth was infinite. I mean, when I looked into his space, it's like it was infinite space, but it was no size to it. It was just vast, and it wasn't empty space. It had a lot of vitality in it. But I'd never, ever experienced anybody that had a space that big, you know, with that quality of theta in it. And then And then he took his attention off me and walked past me, and he was just another guy.
So do you think it was when he puts his attention on you, then you felt all this stuff, but then, so it's almost like he can turn it on and off?
Well, it's almost like I was in calm with his whole universe for that instant. It lasted less than a second, I'm sure, but it seemed like a long time. But it's kind of like when you look at somebody's eyes, and you look in somebody's eyes, and all of a sudden, you see their space. That's their space. That's them. And but you don't necessarily carry it with you, but it's reproducible. You could do it again. But
yeah, I had it happen once where there was. I'm sure I've experienced what you're talking about, but on a smaller scale, with some people who might be like OT and stuff. But I've experienced the opposite of it with someone who looked like they were totally like infested with demons, sort of thing, and another person who I think was a pedo. But I made the eye contact with the guy who was a pedo. I made the eye contact. By the way, my knowingness is just telling me he was a pedo. But I made the eye contact, and it was like sort of disturbing. But with the guy who seemed like he was demon infested or whatever, I was walking past him on the street, and in the last minute I made the eye contact, and it was like horrifying. Like it was really fucked up. It was just the opposite of what you're talking about. But it was just like really disturbing. And I think also this has happened with the past few years. I've expanded as a being, so I'm not used to this ability to see into someone's universe. So I guess he was the first person who I got to really experience this new ability that I'd regained. But it was really disturbing. It was the opposite of what you're talking about, and it was just like seeing into the universe, and it was just like horrible. It's just like, whoa, what the fuck was that? It really shook me up, and it was just like, whoa.
Yeah, I know. I totally get that, and it happens a lot in auditing. A lot of times I'll look at somebody and say, oh yeah, I know this guy, or something like that, or with and also with the L's auditing, which is very interesting. It's the only auditing where you look directly at the being and give them the command, because all other auditing you give the command to the guy's space. You don't look him dead in the eye and give him the command. That's very different. It's a very different experience. And so you know exactly. I mean, there's an awful lot of information you get instantly when you do that, and that's all very, very valid perceptions because it's direct perception.
Yeah. So, what do you think of people who claim to have sort of been in contact with LRH, like spiritually, since he's passed away?
Well, I know Captain Bill has claimed that, and I'm agnostic about a lot of these things. I don't believe it or disbelieve it. I mean, I wasn't there. Some of it seems a little far-fetched to me. Others of it seem okay. To me, like somebody says they're LRH or they were LRH in last lifetime, and so therefore what, So let's say I buy into it, so what? So what does that mean then? Really, that doesn't mean anything, So maybe they'll write some tech, and you go, no, it's just is valid or isn't. It's are they able to produce any of the products that they, like if somebody says, well, I was in contact with LRH and he was saying do this and that, and it doesn't make any sense. Well, just because somebody says it. Like LRH said, he was the only person to found a religion that wasn't claiming to talk to God. Yeah. And so it's kind of like, oh yeah, this is a valid religion because God told me to do it. I'm channeling God, and so you guys need to listen to me. So if you cut that line and you say, well, yeah, you may be talking to God, but that doesn't mean I need to listen to you. Tell me what you want to tell me and see if it makes sense or not,
Would you be open to somebody saying that they were LIH and then coming up with new tech, and would you actually use that tech, or would it, like, if it worked, would you actually use it? I'm just interested.
If it built on something or was a variation on something, I would consider it, sure. Like there's some new tech out, and there's parts of it that are a little bit of a variation on already existing tech. It's a variation that might encompass something a little bit bigger than the original. It's something you would check. Now, the thing is, somebody can say, like Ron Zorg, they want to audit the Marcabians and the lizard people and things like that. And I don't know that much about it, so I could be wrong. Well, okay, so you do an assessment. Lizard people, Marcabians. Well, I don't get any reads on lizard people, but I got to read on Marcabians, so I can. That means that's an item you can. On Mark.
So you were telling me about Marcabians coming up as an item or something.
Well, I'm just saying that, if somebody wants to audit a certain subject, like I said, let's say even somebody wants to come in and wants to be audited on having been abducted by aliens, well, I mean, I don't have any personal reality on that. I don't agree or disagree. It's not really up to me to put my own reality on it, but they talk about it. They get reading thing, spaceship is reading, or this, that, and the other. You can take up reading items because reading items are real to the person telling you about them. So, if somebody comes up with something that isn't in an HCOB or something like that, and they say, well, check this because this would be great to run on somebody. Well, you could check it. It's either reading or it's not. It either violates basic or it doesn't. If the person's interested and it's reading, you can run something. You can do standard processes and run any subject matter. So, like I say, if it's a piece of tech that's kind of like out of nowhere and doesn't build on anything and it sort of contradicts other things, I wouldn't even pay any attention to it. But if it's just a variation that might give you a different angle on something, it's something you could check maybe and see if it really goes somewhere.
Does Marcabian stuff read?
On some people it does, yeah. I mean, partly because, it could be also a false read. They think there's Marcabians when there aren't, they think that there's not Marcabians when they are. If not is Marcabians. Well, the Marcabian Confederacy exists. LRA talks about it. It's one of the civilizations on one of the stars, and whether they're active on planet Earth or whether they're, some of the people that are running the planet are actually lizard people or not. I don't know.
Well, hold on. You're not combining them. They're not the same thing, are they? No, but they're part of the same. They're all part of like Ron Zorg ideology. So is at Ron Zorg, is there a lizard people idea? Is there?
I think it's the Anunnaki,
is there a lizard connection? Oh, do they say lizard people, or what do they define Anunnaki as?
Well, I don't know. I had a guy who was a Ron Zorg guy, and well, this is an actual example. He said that he was in comm with LRH, and LRH sent him a CS, and LRH asked him, because he knew me, he asked him to ask me to audit on this PC, and this PC said, yeah, I want you to audit this on me. And it had the lizard queen, and it had lizard people, and it had Marcabians and minions, and it had
Okay, but Marcabians weren't the lizard people. They're separate things.
No, different things.
Okay, cool. But and
this is the dramatic personnel of this universe, of
the space opera.
Yeah, exactly. It's all space opera, and my understanding of Ron Zorg, like Excalibur, is trying to remove suppressive influences from planet Earth that are off planet Earth. So they go out and up the command chain and, to find basic source of suppression on planet Earth. That's one of the things that they're trying to do. Now, that's not really in the tech, but it's not excluded by the tech either. At a knots level or solar knots level, could you audit that stuff if it came up? Sure. Does it usually come up? No, not really. To me, it's a sort of I think some of these other practices, I think of them as kind of like Scientology cousins, like if you've ever gone to a family reunion, you see people and they kind of look familiar, but you never met them before. And they're kind of like, genetically connected and they kind of look like you a little bit, but you really don't know them. So these are like related Scientology practices that are sort of offshoots and similar in some ways, but again, it kind of goes back to what problem is somebody trying to solve. So trying to say that there's this whole area of tech that LRH has never thought about and never solved, and now we're going to solve it. I would be skeptical of that because, mostly people who say that are just not familiar with the whole body of tech. A lot of times I find that, I know that's where that comes from. That comes from this early tapes, and that's covered there, but didn't kind of it didn't make its way into the body of standard tech that's usually delivered, but it's in the data, and somebody picks it out and says, we're just going to do this now because LRH didn't think of this. Well, I think he did think of it, but he didn't think it was the main line of approach that you would take. There's 1,000 things you could do with a PC, but you want to stay on the main line of case gain, the main bridge line.
Yeah. So with the Anunnaki reference, though, are you just making up the lizard people thing? Because I'm looking up pictures of them, and it seems to be human aliens. Yeah.
Well, there's a guy named David Icke who's got a following in England, and he talks about that a lot. And they're supposedly genetic clones, or they cloned their DNA into human. It gets a little complicated.
Yeah, no, yeah, and it's hard history, but I was just trying to work out: are these reptile aliens, or are these human aliens that we're talking about with the Anunnaki?
They're combination human and reptile. That's my understanding of it. That they cloned their DNA into human DNA, and they're part reptile and part human, and they run things.
And how did this auditing on this person go? Did it work? And do you just go by the principle, if the person gets better, then it doesn't matter what incident and how crazy it sounds? If the person gets better, then yeah, it's all right.
Yeah, well, it was reading. It was reading, and it ran, and person had a win on it and felt better on it. So to me, it was a little bit of an experiment, and so I saw, well, okay, that wasn't so bad, but it's not something I would do.
What?
Yeah.
What about? Do you know anything about modern lizard people? Like the whole idea of them taking over humans' bodies here on Earth, elite being taken over by lizard people. Do you know anything about that? Anything about that come up?
No.
Okay.
It was what I audited was just what I said was like going up the chain from the minion to the holder to the lizard people to the lizard queen, who is the top of the chain. And then the Ronzorg has Xenu in the act quite a lot more than LRH has them in the act, so they've got a different, their worldview is quite different.
So what do you think L. Ron Hubbard's up to these days? And do you think he is contacting some people and acting exterior from a body and trying to forward Scientology or what?
I think that what he said was that he was going to move up the org board and try to handle more basic things in this sector of the universe. You know, in the Sea Org tapes, so somebody told me this the other day, and I thought it was fascinating. In the Sea Org tapes, he said that the stated goal of the Sea Org is to audit out the fourth dynamic engram. In the Sea Org tapes, he says the purpose of the Sea Org is to clear the Galactic Confederation. And so, because, planet Earth it's like a small town in Iowa, compared to the federal government. And so maybe he, is working on a more influential level, that would be my guess. And I think you could always get into communication with somebody. By putting your attention on somebody, you can kind of get a connection. That doesn't mean you get data or you get instructions or you get, voices telling you what to do. But I think you can do that with anybody. I get the feeling that LRH feels that the independent field is doing the right thing. I think if he has any attitude at all, he feels like Scientologists that are well-intentioned and know the tech and get good products are doing the right thing. And whether they're in the church or out of the church. And if you've got overt products or you're, using the tech destructively, he would be very much against that in or out of the church.
What about, I want a bit more juicy information on the Maccabeans. Do you believe that they are here doing stuff now?
I don't believe it myself. But to be more accurate, I don't have any reality on it. But the more important thing, even if it was true, so what? What would that change?
Well, yeah, no, you just, and it's like at the end of the day, like you still have to put your pins out on a Tuesday night. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And, I'm a little leery of this whole thing because I know people that have gotten so involved in that kind of, extragalactic conspiracy theories. A lot of times they just aren't doing that well in life. It's kind of a PTSness connected with it. They always feel that there's somebody or something out there that's running things that I don't know about, and there's not much I can do about it. But for sure, I'm going to get screwed by them, and that's a whole way of looking at things that really doesn't help anybody.
Yeah, well, I think the best thing with suppressive people is just to avoid them. That's just the best way. So, I guess putting attention on that area so much is going to cause problems. But I think, Trey, that kind of says a lot, though, coming from you because you spent so many hours auditing people that you don't have much reality on Maccabeans.
Yeah, well, I would say that it may have come up 2 or 3 times in 50 years that people have mentioned it, and only because they were told about it or read about it and wondered about it.
Well, is anything...
I've had people run incidents on Markabian incidents from the track, but not PT stuff like, I ran into a Markabian yesterday and he, was dressed like a cop and gave me a ticket. I mean... Yeah,
but I know what you mean, but hold on a second. Have you run a lot of incidents that involve human aliens?
No. I honestly say that's never come up.
What about abduction stuff? Because you mentioned stuff about that earlier.
Yeah, I had a couple of people that had abduction experiences. And I've audited PCs that they weren't abducted, but they had close encounters with saucer type.
You've got to tell me about that.
Well, I was auditing a guy one time, and he told me about just driving through. I think it was Arizona or New Mexico, in the middle of the night, and coming up and coming up over a hill, and all of a sudden this big disc, this big glowing disc came up, and he stopped his car, and the disc just hovered there for a while, and he looked at it, and all of a sudden went away. And very credible guy, and I think those are real stories. I mean, even people say they were standing on the bridge with LRH, and he was like, he's going, oh, you see those flashing lights? They were in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, like at night or something like that. I see those flashing lights over there. He says those are spaceships dumping people here.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Because I look into the UFO topic a lot, but I haven't heard of. I mean, obviously, it would be really hard to find that out, but I haven't heard of incidents of Thetans being dropped off here. I assume he was referring to Thetans, right?
Yeah. I think he felt that that was still happening. It's still a dumping ground, and they were still offloading people here.
Makes sense. So, what about abduction? Have you because there's the stereotypical idea of these grey aliens and stuff with the big eyes and the big heads. I mean, have you come across that?
Yeah, that's how they described it. The couple that
and were they getting scientific tests done? The aliens were probing them and stuff, or?
Well, I think part of the problem was that they were unconscious for a period of time. They were taking, so they assumed that there was tests and probing and things like that. But they couldn't remember a lot of it. Their memory was wiped out, but they had memories of the experience, but not the actual middle part of it. That kind of stuff.
With that person, I'm just interested because I was thinking, as you go up the bridge, you open up your ability to access these memories more, right? So did it then enable them to access this memory?
Well, I think they would say that they didn't have the memory. They didn't have it to access. There was no memory of it. So I don't know. I mean, I understand what you're saying. In theory, you would think that even if they didn't have pictures of it, they would have the concept of it. And they did have a concept that they were being experimented on, but they didn't have any pictures of it.
But okay, yeah. But I was just thinking, because it's just like uncovering your backtrack, except they're just uncovering what's happened to them this lifetime. Did it? Yeah. It seemed like. I was just wondering if someone gets to maybe OT7, then if they had been abducted, then they could just easily remember all the pictures from it, or is it just still pretty hard because it's just like such a fresh incident and it's been totally wiped from their memory?
Well, I think it would be more that they didn't have the pictures to remember. You could create a situation where somebody wasn't making pictures, So it isn't a question of occluded pictures that can't be remembered, but maybe later could be remembered. But I think you always could find a knowingness of what happened, but you wouldn't have a record of it per se. Do
you have much reality on creating a situation where people stop making pictures?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's really interesting, because I've always thought of it from the point of view as to these people have had their memories blocked. I never thought of it from the point of view of they actually can't ever get those pictures. Unless they do it from some sort of, maybe it might be to do it from a point of view of remote viewing it, but that means that anyone could do it. Any remote viewer could then look at what happened to that person.
Yeah, I mean, it gets esoteric, I guess. I guess the point is that if they didn't, it's kind of like you can't remember something you never knew in the first place. Like my wife tells me something, and later I said, like she says, oh, I'm going to go get a haircut, and then later I'll say, oh, what'd you do today? She says, well, I went and got a haircut. You remember I told you that? I said, oh, you did? She said, yeah, I said, did I sit there and nod my head and go, uh-huh? And she said, yeah, that's right. And I said, I wasn't listening. So I couldn't remember it because I never got it in the first place. But I remembered. But anyway, just like locks. You scan your day, with the pictures you have of the locks you made. You don't have a picture of everything that happened during your day. You just don't.
So what about with incidents and people going to a condition, like, do the SPs have that ability to put people into a condition where they don't do any pictures of an incident or something?
Well, that seemingly, if I was to guess, it would be part of that sort of space opera technology of creating an electronic field where, pictures are electronic in nature, so you could create an electronic field around somebody where they wouldn't form pictures. I would think that you could do that. It would be a fairly simple thing to figure out. If you didn't want somebody to have a picture of what you were doing.
But you've come across this. You got mass on it, right?
Yeah. Well, and this couple had both of them had experienced it at different times, and some of the people that have experienced it, not that I've known personally, but that I've known, like these people knew other people, and they were kind of people who were interested in the first place. So I think that they kind of put a comm line into the extraterrestrial community, and then they were up there going, "Oh, there's one,"
Do you think that they helped instigate this incident of abduction?
Well, I think not instigated, but they were, if you think about it, you can pull it in. You start mocking it up, say, "Oh, that would be interesting," or, "I wonder what that would be like," And then you start to put your tension up, and then somebody else picks up that they have your attention on it.
Can you go into detail of what happened in this incident?
Well, I ran it out. It's just, they were knocked out, and then there were, I don't know, I think the one guy was like, he was just in his home, and all of a sudden he was like knocked out, and they didn't abduct his body, abducted him apparently.
That's what I've heard. I've heard that the body stays.
Yeah, and so he was there without a body, but with his mock-up, and that it was kind of probably similar to a lot of stories you've heard. It wasn't that different, And it was, by that time, they'd audited it before, but at that time they were kind of, I don't know, kind of proud that they'd gone through that, and it was a kind of an interesting anecdote, they were kind of made them kind of interesting people too, so that's okay. I don't know that it really affected their life other than expanded their reality on extraterrestrials.
They didn't get implanted or anything while they were there? Like, they didn't?
No, didn't think they did, no. No, I don't think it's an implant operation. I think it's a data gathering operation, from my understanding.
Oh, so do you reckon they scanned the Satan and pulled out data and stuff?
Yeah, knowledge, technology, see where people are at, what kind of things are going on the planet. It's part of an intel operation.
Yeah, so there wasn't much talk about taking DNA samples or making babies or anything?
No, not with them. I've heard that with other people, but
you know of other people, or you just?
I've heard those stories. Like Scientology was originally, like Dianetics was originally mostly UFO people. The astounding science fiction and science fiction writers and people who followed UFOs and this whole big UFO thing in the early 50s, those were the Dianeticists in the early 50s. They were all UFO people. So there were a lot of these old timers, and this went out of these people. This was in the 60s, and they've been around for 10, 15 years. So they were into that group of early Dianeticists that were like science fiction people.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, I'm sure they knew other people that had other similar experiences, because you can talk about anything that's real to somebody else who it's real to. So I'm sure a bunch of them get together and they talk about their alien abduction experiences, and it'd be real to each other.
Yeah, nowadays the UFO people do hypnotic regression, which is pretty similar anyway. It's just going on their backtrack and it's just Dianetics go about it a bit of a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a fascinating subject, since it is real, and there's a big effort to keep all of this data unknown generally on the planet and unreal to people.
Well, that would make sense why Dianetics and Scientology was getting attacked if a lot of people were using it to uncover information about abductions and stuff, because in the 50s they were doing a massive cover up of this whole topic. So that would have been another reason for Dianetics to be pissing off somebody or some group.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of vested interests that LRH ran into the teeth of by, issuing Dianetics and his research into Scientology and exteriorization. And, exteriorization isn't something that if you want to, if people can just go exterior, you can't find them. So if you want to be able to find everybody, you're going to keep them in a body. If you want them to pay their bills, they can't just go exterior. You can't collect the money from them, You pay taxes if you can't find them. So they want to keep people attached to bodies so they can be controlled socially. And, that's the space societies have that as a pretty general operating basis.
So from all your experiences of running incidents and stuff, when you watch a movie like Star Wars, is it just like watching Bold and the Beautiful?
Well, yeah, it's like, this is like this Galactic Confederation story, It's, in a way, it's almost the OT3 story, It's the rebellion and the put down and the counter rebellion and the explosions and the chases and the good guys and the bad guys, and
even something like Lord of the Rings, you'd see a bit of info in that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, a lot of these fantasy stories have a lot of they've got it's a way of communicating truth, myths, mythology. There's symbolic truth in a lot of things. It was considered, when the Bible was written, it was considered that anecdotal stories were truth bearers, and now, because of materialism and secularism, unless something's scientifically provable, it's not true, So the whole concept of what's truth, has devolved into what can be experienced mess-wise, and the bigger, more intangible truths are not considered to be truths. And mostly considered to be unreal.
Yeah. I'll just keep on talking if that's all right. Yeah, is that all right? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I've just been watching. I watched Lord of the Rings recently, and I've been watching Star Wars recently. I downloaded like 6 of the movies, and they're remade, so they add computer graphics to them, and they really make the 1980 movie look like it's pretty good quality. Like, I don't think, that's like sort of dodgy, or I'm not distracted by the quality of it. Like, it's great. Like, I like how they've redone them. But I'm just watching it, watching the Jedis, think and make things move with their mind. I'm just like, this is just so true. This whole story, especially about the idea of the Death Star, because there's an idea out there that the moon's made of metal or whatever, and one of the Saturn moons are made of metal, and it looks just like the Death Star in Star Wars. So I'm just like, whoa, this Star Wars has so much truth in it.
Yeah, there's a lot more to life than meets the eye, that's for sure.
What about OT8? You deliver that?
Oh yeah, that's a very important. One of my main goals is because the church screwed it up so badly, and it was very disappointing to me to have people, because personally I had a huge win on it at the time. I did it in 1988 on the ship. I had a huge win on it, so it was fine for me. But so many people were disappointed or felt it was anticlimactic, and they really didn't feel it was worth it. And so it kind of invalidated the whole bridge, you know. But the reason why it didn't work that well with people is because, well, it worked okay with people. I mean, people still had wins. I saw probably 100 people graduate OTA while I was on the ship. And, they all look good. They all had good success stories. And it's not like any of them were really. But, you know, later on, I think these people started to feel it was like, it wasn't that big of a deal. It spent a lot of money, and, you know, it was kind of like I say, anticlimactic. But the problem was that OT8 is supposed to be three major steps in OT8. It's based on two bulletins, 1969 bulletin and 1981 bulletin. And the 1981 bulletin is called OT8, the final step. And the instructions in it say the third step of OT8 is as follows. And
did you say 1981 bulletin? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And you know, it talks about the third step. Well, when I did it, I asked, well, what are the first two steps? Well, nobody really knew. They couldn't answer the question. But anyway, I did it. I had a big win on it. It was great. It was huge. I had a great win on it. But, you know, back in 1971, when I did the Class 8 course, there was a bulletin on it called Why Thetans Mock Up in 1969. The distribution was OT8. And I saw it then. In fact, I've had a copy ever since then, because we could make copies of things and keep them, you know. I had it ever since then, but I never put two and two together. That's the first two steps of OT8. It's right on that bulletin. And if you run the third step without running the first two steps, it's like you don't, because one builds on the other, and you're trying to run a third of it, the third step, without doing the underlying one sets up the next. So the gains you're gonna get out of it are gonna be limited. Plus, the other thing is that you're supposed to audit these things even on the third step. You're supposed to audit. You find items and then you audit those items. You're supposed to audit them to a mass blows, and I think people who weren't great auditors, they just audited it to a FN or a key out, and it didn't really blow the mass. So the mass keyed out, and then a month or two later, the mass keyed in again. And again, partly because the underlying two steps weren't done. So you didn't really get a clean third step. That's what OTA, that's why there's a lot. So anyway, the people that I've actually pulled in to do OT8, that have done OT8 in the church, have been very happy that they've done it. They felt they got a lot more out of it, and it really felt like I think I spent $40,000 on OT8, you know, and it was literally 2 sessions.
Why was it so much money?
Yeah, I know. And I charge $200, and, you know, it might be an intensive or 15 hours or something like that. So for $3,000, you get the full OT8.
Wow,
and,
it's fucking expensive.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, you know. But yeah. Anyway,
it's like I guess like one of the L's. I mean, it's just one of those super expensive. Are they charging $1,000 an hour for the stuff, or no? It's just you pay for it.
No, you pay for the level. You
just pay for it. Yeah.
Well, now the way they're doing it is that you have to buy this 3 intensives, and it's like setups, and so more sec checks, and
oh my god, yeah.
And, you know, and that's tens of thousands of dollars. So they find some way of, you know, milking everything they can out of you at that point on the bridge.
So, what was I going to say? So from your knowledge, training, and your investigations, you've worked out what OT8 is.
Yeah, it is those 2 things. Those are the only 2 things that were ever issued.
What about step 1? Because you said step 3 then, so you found step 2, so what's step 1 then?
Well, the first bulletin has 2 steps on it.
Okay, and then this church has left out the first bulletin.
That's right.
And do you reckon that's because they're keeping it for release as OT9 or something?
Yeah, that's what somebody said. Which again is stupid. Why would you release step 1 and 2 after step 3? But this is Miscavige's think. This is his thinking.
Does this tech, when done properly, does it really make OTs, and that's why the powers that be just had to get rid of it?
I don't think that. I think, again, it's like ignorance and lack of case level to really get it, to really understand it. OT8 disentangles you from past times and places and identities that can still be alive on your case, on your track, and even just other times and places that you still have attention units hung up in. And it disengages you, it disentangles you from past games, past identities, past locations, past experiences, and to some degree, you could say he restores your whole track memory. But another way, your whole track memory, I mean, I find it, I'm very hard pressed. I don't want to say I don't remember anything. I'm saying I don't have, if I want to, I could have a conceptual understanding of something from the past, but I have no past. If I look to where my past usually was, there's nothing there. So, and the other thing is thinking. Unless I'm actively thinking, there's no thinking going on. So I can not think, and it's totally dead space, quiet space, and so to me that's like a really good milestone for OT, and you start to hit those kinds of realities, and existing case realities. That's very valid. That's really what you're going for,
All right. What do other auditors think? What do other top auditors think of your OT8?
Oh, I've never had any criticism of it. I mean, I've had people like present. Well, I've had people there's a lot of people that get confused about it because the church, when it wasn't working, when it started to not work, they started to dick around with it. And the people that got it later, I don't know if they changed the bulletin, or they just changed the instructions, or how people were trained to do it, or they added things into it. They had started having people read books and things like that really weren't part of just some padding. They put some padding in it, and so everybody did little different versions later. But those 2 bulletins are the bulletins that LRH wrote in his lifetime that were issued by the church that he knew about. The only 2 bulletins that talk about OT8, they have any tech in them. The Fishman document that people present as being, that's really OT8. It's really, there's no tech in it. There's no OT8 in it. I don't even know why people give it any credibility.
Oh, that's the black PR, like the bad PR one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's just black PR, but there's no tech in it. Some people say, "Well, that's OT8."
I know, but do you think, just out of curiosity, do you think that was actually written by LRH?
It doesn't sound like him. It contradicts other things that he said all along. It's egotistical. It's delusional.
What sort of contradicting stuff?
Well, he talks about Jesus and being the Antichrist, and in the Class 8 tapes, he talks about the fact that he says that Jesus was wasn't a real person.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I know. Yeah, there's contradiction things where he says, I think when he says there was no Christ, I think he was referring not specifically to, like, there was no Jesus, because there's this conspiracy theory out there that Jesus never existed, right? I think that he's saying Christ, that idea of Christ, because I've heard somewhere him say there was no Christ, but I don't think he's saying there was no Jesus. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's what he was talking about. Whether there was an actual person named that, I think there was, but the concept of what was promoted and was out of the bank.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. Yeah, because the Roman Empire came along and created Christianity and threw it up as this big thing, and I think the Gnostics kept Jesus as being like a normal person that was just OT.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that's kind of mysterious, but the point of the Fishman document is like, it's like it's in theta. It's not even, it's like it's delusional. There's nothing in it that does you anything to you except make you think that Scientology is stupid and you were stupid to ever even be involved. I think it's the point of it.
Yeah, because Jonathan Burke was saying he reckons that it's just made up because I mean, and we know that they've been making stuff up, and I'm pretty certain that the the Navy or whatever were trying to get in there and stop people from doing the OT levels, so they'll go in there and they pinch the tech and they put in other things and stuff, and they want to give Scientology a bad name, like the bad guys. So. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's really known who wrote that or not, but the people that say it's valid say that when, this court case and it was submitted and the church didn't say it wasn't LRH. But see, that's misleading because there wouldn't be anybody in the Guardian's office who would know whether that was OT8 or not. So just to be safe, probably said it was.
Do you think Pat Broker got out with some of this high-level tech or something and ran away with it, or what?
No, I know a little bit about that. He's from, I'm from Buffalo and he's from Niagara Falls. My good friend had a mission in Niagara Falls that Pat Broker came into. Pat Broker and his father came into as a teenager, and he knew him very well. And a few years ago, Pat Broker's father died, and he showed up in Rochester, and my friend was at the funeral and actually got in con with him, and he's just been keeping his nose clean and staying out of it, and he's been being followed for ever since then. He's had PIs on his tail, and he doesn't have anything. He doesn't want. The last thing he wants to do is get involved.
Do you think he is an SP?
No, Pat. No, Pat Broker's not.
Well,
no.
I think I heard that he was changing the comms with David Miscavige. Do you think that he maybe just made some mistakes as a young exec or something like that? Or it seems. I mean, David Miscavige definitely is an SP in this situation, but I think there was an idea floating that Pat Broker was one of the takeover guys as well, and he was a bad guy.
Well, I don't know how, because it seems to me like the alteration would have been data going to LRH from Miscavige. And I don't know why he would have, changed any of that, or why he would change LRH's comm back, because LRH's comm back was based on feedback he was getting from Miscavige and through his comm line. So I don't know. I mean, but my friend certainly didn't think he was suppressive. He thought he was.
That's what I was leaning towards recently. With what I've been finding out, I've been thinking, I think actually, because LRH actually apparently was spending some time with Pat Broker and Annie Broker. Like he was actually around them, and if there were these disgraceful people like the way Dave Miscavige is, he wouldn't be spending time around them. It seems like Miscavige was just around LRH when they were doing the filming or something. And he was just maybe some stagehand or something.
Yeah, that's right. He was just a 16-year-old guy who was helping with the camera or something, And And then I guess he was put in charge of the all clear unit because everybody else was up to their ass in alligators handling all these Hill 10s. And they said, oh, yeah, okay, you handle the comm line with LRH, And he was just a junior guy, but it ended up being a very powerful position. And it was a huge mistake to even put him on that. But he wasn't on that post because he was some big guy. He was on the post because everybody else was busy.
And, hold on a second, though. What about that document that was by Pat or Annie Broker where it was like them declaring that they're admiral or something and pretending like they were LRH? Who wrote it?
Well, that's a little bit of a mystery. I think my friend asked him about that, and he didn't really comment about it. But I think that maybe LRH did write that document, and that Miscavige said it was a fake in order to get rid of the brokers and Ray Midoff, because he was the other guy named on that.
Did Pat, by the way, mention why he ran away or left or whatever?
Well, LRH died.
And Miscavige was there and he was an SP, so it was like, I'm getting out of here. This is crazy.
I don't know. No, that data's never come up. I don't know what actually happened at that point. I think there's a lot of mystery around those last couple of weeks. It would be nice if he actually wrote an account of what happened in those last couple of weeks. Gene Denk was there. He was a friend of mine. He's a doctor, but he kept his mouth. He never said a word about any of his. He was with LRH for over a year.
I would love to hear what Pat Broker has to say about those times and the specifics and stuff, just so you can really put the truth down there and stuff. For example, some people believe that LRH was dead by that stage, by the 1980. So it'll just be good to know.
Well, they were carrying him. They were following him around in Winnebago. It would be hard for him to have been dead.
Yeah, I know, but some people just say it's made up or he was a body double or whatever.
I know. I don't buy it. For that to be, the test of any conspiracy theory is, for that to be true, how many other things would have to be true that we think are not true?
Yeah, you just go by what the preponderance of evidence is saying. And that's the best way. And sadly, sometimes some things are a stalemate. But I feel like the preponderance of evidence is that he was still around till definitely 82.
Yeah, well, he between 82 and 84, he was auditing Solonats. He apparently finished Solonats in 84, his own case of handling. And he had a stroke in 78, 77, and he had a second stroke in 84. And that really kind of did him in. And he was like pretty much in and out of it. He wasn't really, he had good days and bad days for a couple of years. And then there's a third stroke right before he died. So that was...
Except don't they try and say that he got injected with something and that actually is how he passed away?
Yeah, that's wrong. He was, yeah. So, they're talking about Risperdal, which is it's an anxiety. Risperdal is an anti-anxiety medication. It's called a psych drug, but it's not for psych purposes. It's something that physicians use when somebody's had a stroke to keep them from getting too anxious. So when the LRH had his stroke at the end, but this was days before he died, Denk injected him with some Risperdal, which was just to keep him calm so he didn't panic.
So you don't think that's what killed him?
No, a stroke killed him.
You don't think they... Yeah, but... Okay, so he had a stroke, but then he was still alive and they gave him Risperdal or whatever.
Well, that doesn't kill people. It's just an anti-anxiety drug. It's like taking Xanax. It wouldn't kill you.
Yeah. And so you're basically, after the last stroke, you're saying it took like a week for him to pass away after the last stroke?
No, a few days. And I think they saw he was on he was ready to die. See, the thing that bothered me was that it seemed like all these guys went to Las Vegas for the weekend, and when they came back, LRH was dead. So they sort of abandoned him at the last minute. I think they thought he was going to die, and they weren't going to do anything to save him. They didn't kill him, but they weren't going to do anything. And then he did. He just died, and maybe he wanted to do it that way. I don't see. Like I said, there's so many. You can just speculate from now until the end of time.
What is the theory, though? Do people speculate that they injected him with poison secretly, or that they just gave him a lot of Vesperitol or whatever, and that's what killed him?
Well, he had a stroke. I mean, he had heart problems his whole life. He had a bad heart. He almost died in 1977.
But what's the conspiracy theory on it? What are people saying? Are they saying he actually full-blown got injected with poison, or they just gave him a lot of Vesperitol? Do you know what they think?
Well, I don't think they killed him. I think he was just dying. I mean, usually the third stroke kills you. You don't survive 3 strokes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just wondering what the rumor is, though, if you're aware of it, because I'm not that up to date with it.
I'm not aware of any rumor of poisoning him, other than people say, well, people want to make him wrong, say, well, he was using psych drugs. Well, no, he was, number one, he wasn't doing anything. He was comatose. He was injected with Resperdal to keep him quiet, or keep him calm. And Gene Denk was, there was nobody who was more of a LRH loyalist than Gene Denk. He never would have given him something that was going to be harmful to him.
Is Gene Denk still in Scientology, or?
He passed away. He had throat cancer. He passed away about 10, 15 years ago.
Was he still involved with the church, or did he just go?
No, he was still involved with it. He was still involved with the church, as far as I know. Yeah, right up until he died, because he still had the Shaw Health Center, which was a health clinic in LA here. He had it with Megan Shields and Gene Denk had this. They were doctors to most Scientologists.
Oh wow!
You've seen people right up till the end.
So with the Black PR document on OT8, did you actually read that when you're doing it in the church?
No, it wasn't on the level. There's this guy named George White who said it was on the level. He claimed to have done it around the same time I did. It definitely was not on the level.
Because I heard they took it away after the first 6 months. They switched it.
I did it within the first 6 months, and it was not on the level.
No way. Hold on a second. This changes things. Because I thought that they had it there for the first 6 months. It caused too many people to go PDS, and they removed it after 6 months.
No, there's only one guy that I know of that says it was on it. It's a guy named George White, he's written a book, but it wasn't his real name, George White. It's George Whitus or something like that. Anyway, something about it's a sort of a Christian type 3 Christian. It's got all that stuff in his book that's in that Fishman document, the Antichrist and the promise of going to heaven in the OTA. It's type 3 type stuff, in my opinion. To me, he's the only source that says that was on there, and you can look up his book on Amazon. I forget his last name, but it isn't White, but it's WAWOTAEK. Whitek is his name, I think. George Whitek, WITK. Yeah, and you just read the description of this book, and you see it's very much like the Fishman document. I wouldn't be surprised if he wrote it. I don't really know, but.
How soon did you do OT8 after it was released?
It was released in September. I was on the maiden voyage, but I didn't do it on the maiden voyage. I came back 2 months later. So I was within two and a half months of it being released. It definitely wasn't there.
And this guy, when did this guy claim he did it?
Well, he's claiming it was removed after 6 months, so he's claiming he did it within the first 6 months.
But you checked the dates, did you?
On what? The
of
document?
when he claimed he was doing it, and
No. I know he said he did it in the beginning, and then it was taken off later because it upset too many people.
what completions were at when you completed it? How many completions were they for OT8? What number completions?
200, about 200. Then I came back to LA, and then I went back and I was doing some courses. I was there for several months. I saw completion number 1,000. So I assure you, there was nobody on OT8 that was upset by some document.
Okay,
It just didn't happen.
Okay, but I think earlier in this interview you mentioned people were getting upset on it, but that was more because of the processing of it, and that they didn't fully get something flat.
No, I'm saying that they didn't get any lasting gains from it later on. They would never let somebody off the ship who wasn't happy with what they'd gotten off of it. You have to understand that. It's not like people going, "Oh, this sucks, I'm leaving," and they go, "Oh, yeah, you can go." No. Nobody was upset about it. And I didn't run into anybody that didn't have a win on it. Maybe not as big as my win, but they had good wins. And I heard probably 200 success stories, people getting up and giving their success stories. And they were all good. Everybody looked good. Everybody looked very attractive, really. There were a lot of free theta in their space. But there were a lot of the people that did it were old. They were in their late 80s or even some in the early 90s. They had said that they were holding on to the body so they could finish OT8, and then a lot of them within the 6 months, they dropped their body. Some of them had bad accidents. Some of them went PTS.
But what'd they go PTS to?
Well, something keying back in. They went back into their environment. They were happy on the ship. They did okay. They were routed out. They wrote a success story. You never get routed out if you didn't write a good success story and pass the exam. And they thought they had bad indicators. They put you right into a review and they get you fixed up. So, but I'm saying people went back they went back to Toronto, or they went back to England, or they went back to New York or something like that. And then, life started to not go well, or they got sick, or they had accidents, not everybody, but I think that's what it was. They started getting some complaints of people who had gone back home and weren't doing well. So that's when they started to screw around with it.
Now, hold on a second, though. So, do you think it's because they missed out on the first part of it, the first two steps, and that's why they ran into problems? And second thing I want to ask you then is,
and missed out on the first part, and didn't really get the full auditing EP. They got a key out rather than a real erasure.
Yeah, and did the church call you up? Did Free Winds call you up and ask you to come back and do it again 6 months later?
No, I never got a call back. I had a huge win. I think they were just calling back people who weren't doing well.
Okay, interesting. Wow.
Yeah, because they ended up getting up to about 3,000 people, I think. So there was about 1,000 after it was the last time I was on the ship. And then it kind of petered out because everybody that was on the bridge had gone up the bridge and they did OT8, and then there weren't any new people coming up the bridge.
Now,
so
when you said that when did they get up to 1,000 people have done OT8?
That was within 6 months. It was like dozens of people coming and going every day.
Wow. So because I kind of thought that when they first released it, all these people, and they did 150 like real quick or whatever. But then after that, it was like, okay, well, they're all done. And then slowly just some people did it more. But you're saying that like for the whole first year, heaps of people were doing it.
There was a big waiting list. People were just waiting to come there. And because they only had a limited number of space. And so, because I went back, I think it was, what was the first couple of months of the following year of 89? I think it was like January, February, March. I was there, and that was when they hit 1,000. So that was only 6-7 months after they started. And there were people every night. There would be 2 or 3 people giving success stories.
I heard about this idea of on the ship there being a section to keep the body alive in case something happens to the body while you're auditing it, or while you're doing it you go exterior or something and you leave the body. Something really, really out there. Is it true they have special medical sections?
No, that's not true.
Yeah, it sounds like a typical like rumor that someone would spread so that people on the lower bridge are like, "Whoa, OT8's so amazing."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah, the part of the crew that picked up all the bodies at the end of the day, you know.
So you don't have to. You don't full blown leave the body and go away from it, and they. I don't know. Just anyway.
Well, that's called doing a bunk, and that didn't happen. I mean, that's a different thing. That's when you.
No, but hold on a second. Let me say. Do you operate an e-meter exteriorly while you're using it? Do you something to do with OT8 while to run it or whatever, and you're just not in the body or something?
Well, I mean, it's a gradient because to some degree you're not in the body.
I know what you mean. Yeah. Well, what about? Is there any special e-meters that are designed to be used exterior of the body?
No.
So there's no in the whole of Scientology. There's no such thing as, or what about? I heard with the latest e-meters that the church has released, something I think that COB said, like it's like to be used for when you don't have a body or something.
I have no idea. I have no idea what he would be talking about. I mean,
all right. Well, we'll start wrapping this up. So, what about allergy problems? Have you noticed that you can cure that with auditing?
Well, there's a really good process that was developed between 53 and 56 called Remedy and Repair of Havingness. It's in a series of tapes called the OT, the Game of OT tapes. And at that time, LRH was researching auditing the genetic entity. And he developed a whole series of processes on how to audit the genetic entity. And a friend of mine kind of got into that and started auditing it and was really raving about it to me. So I studied it myself and I started, auditing it. And you can do quite a lot with compulsions, addictions, allergies, sensitivities with that tech. Now, that tech was abandoned in 56 because LRH said he didn't really want to spend. Again, it wasn't part of the main bridge. He says we need to make OTs, and auditing the body doesn't make OTs, so we're not going to be doing that anymore. And he didn't cancel it, but he's kind of like, we want to audit OTs. We want to audit the Thetan. We're not going to audit bodies, So, but that whole body of tech is there. It's beautiful tech. It's fantastic. It works really well.
Do people who come and see you, if they want to do that, can they get it from you, or do you recommend it for some people with allergy problems?
Well, you'd have to. I mean, I don't know many people that have really ever even studied the tech, and they may have listened to the tapes, but they haven't really practiced it. But I've had people. I remember very well as one lady. I talked about this on one of my tapes. Is this guy that was auditing? He was like about 22 years old, and this guy was a really enthusiastic drinker. And he would get his drink on, he would drink a drink, and then he would have 2 drinks, and then he was gone for the weekend, And he would black out. It's not a good scene, but he wanted some help with this. So we ran this. I had him, I ran the process on him quite a bit. No, maybe I ran it, I think, twice. We ran it like maybe half hour, 45 minutes both times, And this was like right between Christmas and New Year's, and then he was gone for like a month, And so I was really curious on what would happen, with this guy, especially over New Year's, And so he comes back, in 3 or 4 weeks, and sits down and I said, "How you doing?" And he starts telling me about all this stuff and blah blah blah. I didn't even mention any of this other thing, And I was thinking, that's kind of odd. And so I said, okay, fine. So he says, oh, and by the way, he says, I don't know what you did in the last session, but he says, I went out on New Year's Eve. I was all ready to get blasted. He says, I had a drink. Well, I didn't feel like drinking anymore. He was kind of disappointed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I get it back. So,
hey, you know some interesting stuff about remote viewing, don't you? I remember you were mentioning to me when I spoke to you the other day a little bit of personal data about Ingo Swann, was it, or Hal Puthoff?
Hal Puthoff, I met him and talked to him in 1969. He came down to do some services, and we were staying in the same building over off Temple Street. And nice guy, interesting guy. He had quite a few good conversations with him. I never met Ingo Swann, but I knew people who knew him pretty well. Actually, still know him. I think Al Puthoff is still alive. Ingo Swann died, but knew him all the way up till a few years ago when he died. Ingo Swann, and so they did all that research up there at Stanford Research Institute. There were other people that weren't Scientologists, but at least those two were.
Yeah, and was it featured in some sort of AO magazine, like saying that OT level is so cool, they can make OT abilities, and like we even tested it with the CIA and Stanford Research Institute, and it proves that they can do OT abilities or something like that?
May have. It sounds familiar. It might have been in a magazine. I mean, they put one out every month, so there was like hundreds of them. But I don't know. I may have seen it, but it sounds familiar. I know it was generally publicized that they were Scientologists, and it was publicized that the CIA was interested in the OT levels because they thought, particularly Ingo Swann, really thought that even though you could probably say that they had these abilities, but like any ability that a person has, you can enhance it, and I think that when you get auditing, the entire bridge, every level of the bridge is an ability regained. And it's an important point because you take any ability that the person has, like the ability to communicate, ability to solve problems, everybody's got some ability in that area. So when you audit the grade, like a grade 0, you take that ability and you boost it up quite a lot. So that they're better ability to communicate. But you also release the person on that area, which means that they can continue to expand their ability to communicate, solve problems, and to apply the abilities of the grades. So the telepathic ability, the ability to, any perceptive ability that somebody has can be increased, and the ability to remote view could be increased by auditing in the OT levels, because that's what Scientology is all about, is increasing the abilities of the being and the ultimate ability to operate more independently of the body and not to be so dependent upon the body for everything.
Mm. So what do you mean? Right about back then, Ingo Swann was saying, yeah, I'm a Scientologist and blah, 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 and I'm involved with Stanford Research Institute, so it was all open and honest?
Well, yeah, everybody knew that.
Because it just seems like from like 1990 onwards or whatever, that like they just don't talk about Scientology at all, about their history in Scientology, and it's like there's a big cover-up on it.
You see, I wouldn't call it a cover-up. What I would say is that, again, Miscavige had the idea. See, they used to print these OT success stories, these OT phenomena wins in Advanced Magazine all through the 70s. People say, oh, yeah, and I was like, I was driving my car and I knew something was going to happen, so I pulled off on a side street, and then a big piano crashed in the middle of the street, or something like that. And his idea was that this was unreal to people, and the only thing you really wanted to talk about is I could talk to my mother better because I did the comm course, and
It's all the boring shit.
Well, yeah, just garden variety, sort of therapy kind of wins. Counseling therapy kind of wins. Not really. He didn't want OT. They stopped publishing them. You see the magazines; they don't publish OT phenomena anymore. They haven't since about the 90s. So it was that kind of parascientology stuff. He didn't want people talking about it. He didn't want people speculating about it. He didn't want Scientology to be known because it was unreal to people. It caused Scientology to be ridiculed or mocked or something like that. And he didn't want that. He thought the solution to that would be to not talk about any of that stuff. So he suppressed a lot of communication. But the fact of the matter is there are a lot of people out there that does resonate with, and they go, maybe these guys are onto something. Where you just start talking about, I can get along with my boss better. I show up on work now. I show up on time on work now. Say, well, that's nice. I don't need that.
But why do you think that means that Ingo Swann and Hal Puthoff just completely stopped talking about Scientology?
I don't know that they did. I think that experiment, I don't really know their history. I mean, he wrote a book. He talks about it in his book.
He talks about Scientology in his book. Does he talk about Scientology in his book?
Yes, that's what. One of my friends is a good friend of his, and it had been in common with him pretty regularly, over the decades. Till recently, he passed away. He said it's in his book. That's what he told me. He talked about doing his OT levels and said how it helped him hone his, improve his ability to remote view and that kind of thing.
But they do seem to avoid that topic, and they seem to avoid specifics of how it got started and who they were really working for. I mean, I heard that, I don't know if it's Hal Puthoff or Ingo Swann, they worked for numerous different government organizations.
That may be true. That's what we knew about, was the remote viewing and the CIA, and that was known at the time. I mean, that wasn't a secret.
Wasn't it if you're involved with the government, you're not allowed to do the OT level? So how did he get allowed to do them?
Well, that whole illegal PC thing came out later.
Okay, so after that...
I'm talking about 1969, 1970. Things were very loose then. My eligibility, when I went in to do my OT levels, I said, what's your name? Trey LotzPART2. What do you do? He said, I'm an auditor. He said, okay, you're great. That's it. That was my eligibility. That was my entire eligibility for doing the OT levels. Oh, you audit people? Good, pass. You go ahead. Very loose.
What about, when did Ingo Swann and Hal Puthoff stop being involved with Scientology?
I don't know. I really don't.
Okay.
Probably around the same time that a lot of people left in the early 80s. Because I know they were involved in the 70s, but I didn't hear about them hardly ever after that.
What about in the late 70s?
Maybe.
Was there any, did he do the new Solo Knots that was released in 78 or whatever?
I don't know. I kind of doubt it, but I don't really know. I don't have a lot of data about that. It wasn't something I tracked with.
Do you like Ned or do you like Expanded Dianetics?
Well, Expanded Dianetics is really it's really, to a large degree, the L's tech watered down so it could be audited at a class 4 level. Yeah. It's really not hardly run anymore. Just like the Scientology drug rundown is run rather than the NED. The drug rundown when they get to NED. But I think it's valuable to even today I audit book 1 on new people because I think it's very valuable to run engrams and to get a reality on the engram bank. I did probably 10,000 hours of standard Dianetics in 1969, 70, 71, 72. I had 1,200 hours of standard Dianetics myself as an OT3. So I was very familiar with that tech. It was really good tech, but it had a different purpose. The purpose of that tech wasn't to clear somebody, and it was run a little bit differently than NED. But it was the same idea. You're still running engrams.
No, but isn't expanded Dynetics specifically supposed to achieve clear?
No, not expanded Dynetics. Expanded Dynetics was supposed to leave perps. That was 1974, expanded Dynetics.
Hold on. Maybe I'm getting expanded Dynetics confused with just whatever it's called, Dynetics. The thing that they used before NED got released.
Oh, it's just called standard Dynetics.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I'm getting confused.
Yeah. Well, that's essentially the same. There's a few commands that are different, and the rundowns are different. The assessments are different. Oh, by the way, the thing about expanded Dynetics was really replaced by the false purpose rundown. The false purpose rundown had the same purpose as expanded Dynetics. It's almost never. I don't know anybody that's run expanded Dynetics in 30 years. But I mean, they may be still running it somewhere, but it's not really run very much.
Okay. And so PCs, do you give them an option of choosing standard Dynetics or NED or?
Well, I don't do standard Dynetics because if I'm going to do it at lower levels, I just do book one. And I use effort processing with it mostly. It runs pretty fast when you use effort processing with it. That was 1951, 52. He started to do more effort processing in with book one. And, there were... You familiar with that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I've read it, like in the basic books and stuff.
Yeah. Well, a person's own effort is their effort to survive, and the counter effort is the effort of the environment that goes against the desire to survive. And the whole purpose of Dianetics is the engram is the experience of the organism in trying to achieve survival, in getting set back on that survival, the Dianetic axioms. So the engram contains the efforts and counter efforts, and they lock up because the effort and counter effort locks up. And so what you can do with effort processing is you have the person get the feeling of the effort and then get the feeling of the counter effort. That unbalances the flow and the engram blows. So it's a very fast way of running engrams. And so I do that at lower levels, and then if the person isn't clear, most of the people I audit are clear anyway because they've come onto my lines after having gone clear already. But if they're not clear, we just do NED. We do NED, after the grades, and that works fine. Several people have just gone clear right away on that. So,
all right. So last question now. What's this you're mentioning about climate change or something? Because I spoke to you a few days ago and you're saying something about LA being cold, I think.
Yeah, well, there was a headline in the LA Times 2 days ago. It said this was the first month, February was the first month ever recorded in history that the temperature had not gotten over 70 degrees anytime during the month. And that the snowpack, the next day, the snowpack in the Sierras was at record levels, and they've had more snow than they've had in decades. And other indicators of longer winters, more snow, colder temperatures over the last 2 to 3 years. Every winter for the last 3 years has been colder and longer than the one prior to it.
Yeah, I've been noticing the same stuff in Melbourne. I do agree there was a warming trend in maybe the 90s and 2000s, but not within the past 9 years. I mean, I've noticed a definite difference right across the world. I mean, you hear about snow in Hawaii and stuff, and I mean, Chicago, whatever happened to them this year, like that, where it looked like it was out of a movie. Pretty interesting. So what is it, because the sun's getting weaker or something?
Well, one of the biggest influences on temperatures is the sun flares, and they follow cycles. They wax and wane. You get an increase like the last decades. You can graph them. They go like this, and it was called de minimis is the decline of the sunspot activity, and de maximus is where it peaks out and stays peak and then starts to go the other way. So it's been doing that for millions of years. And when there's more sunspot activity, there's more warming of the atmosphere, and when it goes down, there's a cooling of the atmosphere. So NASA, in the fall, they came out with some data. They're constantly monitoring temperatures, not just of the air on the planet, but they measure the temperature of the outer reaches of the atmosphere of the planet, and they measure the temperature on the surface of the sun. And they found that both of those things have dropped precipitously over the last year or so, and to some of the coolest temperatures they've ever recorded on the atmosphere and on the surface of the sun, and some of the least amount of sunspot activity that they've recorded ever. And they said back in the fall that this has not reached it has not reached the point where it's influenced our weather yet, but he said give it 2 or 3 months and it will. This is what NASA said, and that was back in like November. So then, yeah, November was the coldest November in a long time, and Thanksgiving was the coldest Thanksgiving they'd ever recorded, which is the end of November in the U.S.
Yep.
So,
yeah,
not to make a big deal out of it, but where they say the generals are always fighting the last war. Well, these global warming people are just fighting the last war. The last war was this warming trend that occurred from overall from, I guess, the late 1800s up to around 1999, when all those predictions were made about, it was going up like this. So the prediction was it would keep going up like this. Well, in fact, it ended up like this. So.
Yeah, it seems like it's a big effing scam, and I feel like I've been looking into heavily recently, and I've come to a conclusion on it. And it's I've noticed with SPs, it's the opposite, like the exact opposite. Like you would think of COB, and things are the exact opposite of what he says. So he's actually changing the tech; he's not fixing it. You know what I mean? It's the exact opposite. But yeah, it seems like this isn't again in the category the exact opposite's going on. You know what I mean? And it's good to get to that point. You end up just having to go with your own observations and what you can test and check yourself, and just not believing what you hear.
Yeah, well, by the time a trend becomes apparent, it's already been going on for quite a while, and then everybody gets on the bandwagon. And then by the time that everybody agrees that that's what the trend is, it's changed. It's reversed. It started to reverse already. See, when everybody piles in at the end, and everybody agrees, that's where the change occurs. And it starts to go.
And you can think of it from the funny point of view, because the conspiracy theories have gotten really popular in the past 10 years. A lot of people could be aware of the potential global warming scam, and they've all stopped postulating that. You know what I mean? So their minds are thinking differently, and then we get a different reality from that collective reality. I mean, they have done tests where they've gotten people together to order prayer, and collectively it pulled off the prayer. So this is true.
Yeah, people definitely can influence events by their intention and their agreement and their focusing, and the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. The observer creates an effect on the particle just by observing the particle.
Yeah, exactly. So, if people want to contact you, they can go to your website. Yeah, I'll put a link for that. And you got a Facebook and stuff, do you? Yeah.
Yeah, just my name on Facebook.
Yep. Well, they can get through to you on APIS.
Yep. And my email is Trey at relaypoint.net. That's RELAYPOINT.net.
All right. What's the meaning of relay point? Is that like for your website or?
This is like yahoo.com or something. Relay point is just a internet server.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. Trey at relaypoint.net. It's
Yeah.
like, it's like as in you passing on something to the CS or something. Is that?
Yeah, really point. I know it's appropriate.
Yeah, well, yeah, it sort of is. All right, great it's good to speak to you, and good for you coming on. And sorry for taking up so much time. It just went on for ages. Is there anything you want to say or ask?
I feel like we could talk forever. It's been good talking to you. And I don't know if you want to put all 3 hours of this up, but
No, I am. I'm going to do it. I'll probably have about 2 hours, 50 minutes, but I'm going to just do one massive one. Or actually, maybe I'll split it up. You're right. It is long enough to split up. Anyway, is there anything you would like to say or ask before I end this interview?
no, it was very interesting. I've done a lot of interviews of radio and things like that, and how an interview goes depends a lot on the interviewer because, you're basically in communication, and I appreciate your communication, and you've made it easy and workable for me to do this, and I appreciate that.
Good. And the interference was exciting. I liked how it was on specific things. And I'm telling you, I use Skype outside of doing these interviews, and the internet doesn't turn off while I'm using Skype for other purposes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just funny. It's just classic. Especially the Anunnaki, I think the Maccabean thing, because I'm suspicious about this idea that it's not just people in OSA sending out trolls, and I think that there's something more to it. And the dark forces taking over the church or something, and I don't know.
No, I think you're right. Somebody somewhere is going, they're on to us. Better shut it down there for a minute.
Yeah. All right. Good to speak with you. Bye-bye.
See you here. Take care.
Alrighty. That was it. There's no more parts to the Trey Lotz interviews, just 2 parts. I hope you liked him. I milked him for as much data as I could. Well, it's time now to end off the podcast, but before I end off, I've got to end off with a quote, an LRH quote, and this is from the Data Evaluators course. It's from something called Data Series 8 Sanity, and I didn't bother putting down the date, but it's in mid-1970. That was when he was writing a lot of the Data Series stuff. It's deep stuff because you read this, you're studying the Data Evaluators course. I'm doing it online with the Advanced Organisation of the Great Plains. They're online courses, which is a good format. It works. And I've got a twin and everything. I totally recommend it. But Jonathan Burke said that this Data Evaluators course is like an OT level, but for admin. And I agree. I've had some funky stuff happen on the course. I'm not even halfway through it yet, but I mean, it's pretty deep stuff. It increases your ability to see reality and the truth of what's going on around you. And I think you're probably not as much in a fog or like a zombie state where you're just not aware. But it's kind of deep at times. It's a bit confronting at times because it's like, whoa. Because you might not know this, but we live in a full-blown nutty world. And this course here, it really wakens you up. Like, if you don't want to waken up, then don't do this course. Don't even do Scientology. You know, just go into some little matrix of eating pizzas on the weekend or something and watching sport or whatever. Go into that little Hollywood box, that little fake world that's not dealing in the truth, but just being entertained by pretty little flowers dancing around. You know what I mean? But if you want to wake up, and if you're into Scientology and you already listened to this podcast and you're obviously on that journey of waking up, then do the Data Evaluators course. And it's a bit confronting because it's like, whoa. Because it basically enables you to see out points and see how insane the world is. And so it's kind of confronting because you're like, whoa, I'm living in a batshit crazy place. You know, like, you know what I mean? Like, that's where it's like, it's not easy because it's like a bit like, whoa, this place is it allows you to see things. I imagine it allows you to see the world the way LRH could see the world and how he was so smart. So you do this course and you can see how there's outpoints and there's illogicalness everywhere, and you just live in this batshit crazy world. So like before, for example, you're in the whole ignorance is bliss thing, right? But then, like, after you sort of do the data evaluators course, you're aware of what's going on, and you don't have that ignorance is bliss thing. It's not like you feel bad all the time or anything, but you can see into things more. Like you know what's going on. And this thing here is really important, where L. Ron Hubbard's written something in this quote about sanity, and it's just a good point of what some of the stuff you hit on this course, where it's deep and stuff. And I've been having some funky things happen on this course. I've had weird stuff happen memory-wise. Like, just, what the hell? They're just odd stuff. Something involving a school in, like, this area of Melbourne that affects me, and memories, and just, like, weirdnesses. But it opens stuff up. It's auditing me. This is why I'm saying it this way. Jonathan Burke said that this data evaluators course is like an OT level, but for admin. I mean, it's auditing me. It's always doing something. It's opening up stuff in my case, and it's like, whoa, this is a bit of an adventure. Anyway, he says here, the fixed idea is the bug in sanity. Whenever an observer himself has fixed ideas, he tends to look at them, not at the information. Prejudiced people are suffering mainly. You know, it's funny, I can have all these case gains and that sort of stuff, but tell you what, I've never really been good at pronouncing words. Prejudiced. Everyone's got different abilities, you know. Like, some people are just good at shooting hoops in basketball. I mean, obviously pronouncing words is my thing. Prejudiced people, I don't know, I guess my memory isn't that good, so I'm just thinking, how do people say this word exactly? Prejudiced people. That's how I would say it, but I feel like I'm saying it wrong. Prejudiced people. It doesn't matter. It's like, I know what the definition of the word means, by the way. If someone's saying, oh, it's got an MU, that's why saying it's wrong. It's just like, no, I know what the word means. Maybe, actually, see, this is where it goes real deep, and there's more to what's going on. See, because I had braces when I was like 17, and I know that when I had that metal in my mouth, it actually modified the way I pronounced words and actually messed with things, and it messed up like my muscle memory actually a little bit. And this could be a hanging on of that or something. Anyway, prejudiced people are suffering mainly from an fixed idea. The strange part of it is that the fixed idea they think they have isn't the one they do have. An example of this is the social scientist with a favourite theory. I have seen tons of these birds pushing a theory as though it was the last theory in the world and valuable as a 10-pound diamond. Such throw away any fact that does not agree with theory. That's how 19th century psychology went off the rails. All fixed ideas and no facts. The physical sciences in Hegel's time did the same thing. There was no eighth planet in the solar system, even when found in a telescope, because 7 is a perfect number, so there can only be 7 planets. I mean, what a quote. I mean, it's so deep. This is what I was talking about earlier, where I was saying, because the person's got their own sense of what's real. You say to them, here, this is what's going on. You present them with evidence. You go, look, this is what's going on. And they go, there can't be a planet there. And then they can be looking at a fucking planet on a telescope. And they'll be like, oh, there's not a planet there because this data says that there shouldn't be a planet there and blah, blah, blah. And they can't confront reality, you know. And this fixed idea stuff is just, it's so true because this is explaining what I'm talking about, where people are fixed into boxes because they're walking around in this mind control box life that they've put themselves into that's like a jail cell, but a mental jail cell. And their fixed ideas have blocked them in there and stop them from getting out, because whenever they look in any areas, they can only see their fixed idea. That can't be the, you know, like think of it from their point of view. That can't be the case. No, it's this, it's that. Oh, it's just that. And it's just like, no, dude, we're living in a freaking magical world, and there's like aliens and underground bases and stuff, and there's UFOs and all this wild stuff going on. And there's a Mandela effect and stuff. But this person stays in their little box and goes, no, that's just people remembering things wrong, and just ignores the Mandela effect and walks off. And because their fixed ideas are blocking them in and caving them into this little box, you know. So I'll just read the thing again. Whenever an observer himself has fixed ideas, he tends to look at them, not at the information. He just goes straight to his fixed idea. His fixed idea is that the Mandela effect can't exist because the universe is boss and this is how it is, and things can't suddenly just change and a movie line change in a movie, and for all of history it's changed now. Their fixed ideas that can't happen. You can't change the past or whatever. They have a fixed idea of what their idea of reality is, and it's just like, no, you don't understand. Where in a computer game, things are much wilder than that. You can just change things and things just magically happen and stuff. But their fixed idea, you know, they see the evidence for Mandela effect. I present them with the evidence. And they just go boom and hit their fixed idea and go, no. And they don't even bother inspecting that stuff. Seriously, you can see it. With the chemtrails and the government controlling the weather and stuff. You can say, here, look, blah, 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 blah. Look at the evidence. And they just go, no, that's ridiculous. And they walk off. They don't even look at it because they're looking at their fucking fixed ideas. It's just, you know, this is why it's just so deep. I mean, I read out this long quote, and I was just thinking, man, I should have just read out one sentence and just left it at that. Because this is what I'm saying, you need to have datums of comparable magnitude and mass and stuff to understand what he's talking about. But this is real deep, hardcore, matrix-busting info. I'll read it again. The fixed idea is the bug in sanity. Whenever an observer himself has fixed ideas, he tends to look at them, not at the information. Prejudiced people are suffering mainly from a fixed idea. The strange part of it is that the fixed idea they think they have isn't the one they do have. An example, I mean, it's just so right, Hubbard, so true, so true. An example of this is a social scientist with a favourite theory. I've seen tons of these birds pushing a theory as though it was the last theory in the world and valuable as a 10-pound diamond. Such throw away any fact that does not agree with theory. That's how 19th century psychology went off the rails. All fixed ideas and no facts. The physical sciences in Hegel's time did the same thing. There was no eighth planet in the solar system, even when found in a telescope, because 7 is a perfect number, so there can only be 7 planets. It's just, I mean, you know. I'm reading this, right? And this is taken from my course, and I read it recently. I'm reading this, and memories are going off. Well, I wouldn't say memories, but I'm getting facsimiles of a certain location at school I just told you about a few minutes ago. Are going off in my mind when I read this. And it's like, why? Wasn't a school that I went to. It's just like, this is what I'm saying, it's like it almost audits you, like funky stuff happens where you're like, whoa, you know. It's not like memories are going off of me in a past life or something in 1980, and I'm getting memories of that being in Los Angeles or something like that. And I'm like, oh, okay, so wow, reading that thing, somehow much the blown charge, and now I'm thinking of 1980 when I was in my past life, and now it's been opened up for me from reading this. That's not happening. I mean, something else really weird is happening. Maybe those past life memories involving this school or something. But I'm having memories of when I was like 7 years old in this location. And then it's like tied up with like the Donnie Darko movie, and it's just like, whoa, like it's just like, what the hell? Like it's just, it does funky stuff. It's starting to open up stuff in my mind, but it's just like, obviously this thing is just so deep and so like, whoa, there's something to it. Anyways, that's why it's like you go on an adventure, because it's like, whoa, you're evolving and changing and you're going into all this coolness. It's like, it's wild, but you're really confronting the reality of the universe, and it's kind of scary. It's like when you go in and you study the Mandela effect, like it is scary. I remember the first night I found out about it, it was cold and dark at night, and I was like, whoa, what the fuck is going on? Like you think, am I going crazy? Like, this is wild. What the hell? I was looking at all the evidence for Mandela effect, and I watched all these videos on it and read about it, like, because I was just like, what? I was like, hold on, stop everything. This is just wild. This Mandela effect is off its tits. This has changed my whole concept of everything, the Mandela effect. And that's why I just watched heaps of it massively. I think for one 24-hour period, I went wild. Had a wild 2 weeks as well when I found out the truth about the Church of Scientology, and I was looking into things, and I was like, whoa, what the hell? It got taken over by government. He's David Miscavige is an SP, and this was actually no T-levels, and I was like, whoa, this is wild, you know. But I had a really big one with the Mandela effect for like 24 hours, and it was scary because it was like, whoa, everything isn't what I thought it was. Like you're just like, whoa, what the hell? It was scary, right? I think the Data Evaluators course is a bit like that as well, because it like wakes you up to the truth, and it shatters all these fixed ideas you have and of what's really going on, and you're like, whoa, this is kind of scary. Like, it's scary at first, but then you get over it because you're going on this like mental adventure. But like, you're just like, whoa, this is scary. You know, it's just it's something. You know, it's definitely something really, really deep. Anyway, that's it for today's show. It's time for you to climb back out of this rabbit hole, out of this interesting Scientology world. Thanks for listening. I've been your host, Andy Nolch, the Space Cowboy. You have been listening to the Indie Scientology podcast. And remember, what you thought was impossible is possible.